Ignorance. Ignorance. Whenever you bow down to this building, I want you to remember me in it. From now on, every time you recite those empty, useless words, think about the presence of God within me inside your temple, so that your prostrations will have something to do with the presence of God. News is that if you're a sincere Muslim, you've been bowing down 5 times a day to a pagan temple that Muhammad strong-armed from the polytheists of Mecca. The Kaba...
First of all, no one who actually understands the Islamic theology believes that anyone's praying to the building.
Ignorance. Think about the presence of God within me.
Now, we as Muslims, this is something a lot of people don't think about, we don't consider the bricks of the Kaaba to be sacred and holy. The bricks of the Kaaba are just clay and sand. It is the location that is holy. It's not the marble of the floor. It's not the silk covering of the Kaaba. It's not the bricks that the Kaaba is used to build with. It is the place that Allah created. And the Kaaba, a lot of people don't know this, is rebuilt every few decades. It's just like any structure. How long does a building last? You know the last reconstruction of the Kaaba, who can guess when it happened? The current Kaaba that we see now, who knows when was this Kaaba built? The people who live and visit frequently know, around 10 years ago. The current Kaaba is literally only 10 years old, that's it. There is nothing holy about the Kaaba. It is the area, it is the land of Mecca that is sacred. The Kaaba comes and goes, and after another 50 years, it's going to grow weak, the foundations are going to be crumbling, they're going to have to rebuild it.
Muslims, they say, worship a black box in the desert.
So let me just go online.
Right, and the black box is a sacred house, and it is not worshipped whatsoever.
So
Ignorance. We're good?
Yeah, we did.
All right, well, let's record this before they change their minds and make us leave. Hello, everyone. As you can see, this message is coming to you from inside Islam's holiest site, the Kaaba. Think about the presence of God within me. Think about the presence of God within me. Just a few hours ago, I said to the guards, hey guys, politicians and the media keep telling us that Islam's a religion of equality and tolerance. And as everyone knows, saying something over and over again makes it true. So how about showing the world you don't really hate non-Muslims by maybe letting just one of us somewhere inside your country's capital? By maybe letting just one of us somewhere inside your country's capital. Think about the presence of God within me. Ignorance. Now, when I point this out to Muslims, you usually respond, well, the Jews bowed down to the temple in Jerusalem, and we're just doing something similar. Wrong. The Jews bowed down to the presence of God within the Jerusalem temple. They weren't bowing down to the building. They were bowing down to the Almighty Himself, who descended and filled the temple.
And if God doesn't dwell in temples made by human hands, as the Bible tells us, and if God doesn't dwell in temples made by human hands, as the Bible tells us,
think about the presence of God within me. News is that if you're a sincere Muslim, you've been bowing down 5 times a day to a pagan temple that Muhammad strong-armed from the polytheists of Mecca.
Ibrahim alayhi salam came to Ismail. By the way, Ibrahim made many visits to Mecca. One of these visits, in a hadith narrated by Bukhari, Ibrahim alayhi salam comes to Ismail and tells him, we have been commanded to build the house of Allah. So Ibrahim and Ismail started building the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
They come to you saying, hey, let's bow down to that thing over there. But it's not idolatry when we do it.
Muslim theology, basic beliefs, basic practices. Islam is a religion of monotheism. It's based on the principle that there is nothing in creation worthy of worship, that we are all creations of one divine God.
Think about the presence of God within me. You've sinned, and God punishes sin. That, my friends, is the bad news.
God detests anyone who does this. A woman must not wear men's clothing, nor a man wear woman's clothing, for Yahweh your God detests anyone who does this.
So he detests, so Yahweh, the God of the Bible, detests a man who goes around in women's clothing.
That's right.
I've managed to squeeze this 240 pounds of awesomeness into the only garment in my wife's dresser stretchy enough to hold it. Ignorance. Ignorance.
To say that Jesus was God and man at the same time is like saying I saw a square circle. The thing does not exist. For Jesus to be a man, he had to have a human mind. And for him to be God, he had to have a divine mind. Now the human mind has to know that he's not God. A human mind that thinks that he's God is a madman. But the divine mind has to know that he's not a human being. God couldn't think that he's a human being. And so the two could not really meet. There are two minds in the one person, and that means you do not have a God-man.
So there's a deficiency in the way in which God is being conceived of here. And obviously the solution to this confusion is to go back to what the Old Testament taught and to insist that there is only one God. Well, it's the Quran that brought us back to that message. And when people might say to us, well, your prophet is a false prophet. So we should say, okay, so this is what false prophets do? False prophets call us back to the original message that was preached by all of the previous prophets, like, Noah and Abraham and Musa alayhi salam. That's what false prophets do? Is this the work of shaitan, or this is the work of God that's bringing us back to that original message? In fact, we should look back and see what spirits cause people to deviate from that original message which the Bible had said they should write on their foreheads and band on their hands and nail on their doorposts. So I believe this is a very important point that we need to share.